You're listening to Beyond the Buy with Alissa, Menke, and Angie, Grau.
Welcome to Beyond the Buy. On today's episode, we are going to discuss the different media metrics, what they mean, and why they matter.
Yeah. So let's start with this question. Why should marketers that maybe aren't involved in the day-to-day placing or optimizing of ad campaigns really care about media metrics?
That is a great question. The media metrics are going to be important for anyone on the marketing team to understand, even at a base level, because even if you're not placing it, you're going to be speaking to your executive team, your higher ups. You want to make sure that you understand because they may have questions about that information, but it also means that you are prepared and you have an understanding as to what those things mean and how they might work. So you yourself have the ability to potentially catch things that maybe don't jive, don't align, and you just have a better understanding altogether of what's happening once that leaves in-house and goes outside to be placed. So then, you can speak to that, ask questions, and make sure you're getting the right kind of information.
And one of the things that we have frequently encountered is a lot of times our clients may not necessarily know what those acronyms are, or they kind of do, but because there's sort of some overlap, they get confused. It is always 100% okay to ask and just to clarify with the agency that you're working with your coworkers, just so that everybody's operating on the same table. We all have that same understanding of like, what is this base for this conversation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
All right. So speaking of these lovely acronyms,
there
are lots of them. It's easy to confuse them because a lot of them are similar. So within media reporting, let's just start with the basics, okay?
Yeah.
So CPM, CPC, CPA, those are some that are thrown out pretty early on in your media placement. So can you kind of define those, explain what those all are?
Yeah, so we'll start with CPM. It's cost per thousand, not cost per million, which was very confusing to me as I started my first year of marketing a long, long time ago. So cost per thousand. CPC is going to be cost per click. So that is purely a digital play. And then CPA is going to be cost per acquisition.
And how would you define acquisition? Is that going to be the same for everyone, or is that going to be dependent on the goals of the client?
Yeah, no. So I would say that is very dependent on the client goals. And it's along the same lines as cost per conversion, but also they're not the same. So again, having that discussion with your agency or with your marketing team to make sure that everyone's on the same page and we're very clearly defining what an acquisition is or what those conversions are is very important.
Okay. So let's dig into CPM first.
Sure.
What does cost per thousand impressions, like what does that actually tell us when we're looking at that information?
Yeah, so that basically breaks down how much did I actually pay for this ad to be seen 1,000 times. Now, I am going to air quotes on the scene because and the same is true in the traditional world.
Yes.
But in the digital world, if that ad is served and it is on the footer of the website and the viewer never scrolls down, that is still an impression. It is still counting towards that cost per thousand impressions. So it is just the number of times those ads are served. But yeah, that CPM, that cost per thousand, is a really good way to understand how much does it cost to run connected TV ads versus display ads versus anything really.
Okay. And how would CPC be different from that?
Yeah, so CPC is cost per click, and it is a different way that some ads are charged. So when you think about a display ad or a video ad, it is a cost per thousand billing cycle. But when you think about CPC, we only get charged when someone clicks. And so that amount is how you're determining how expensive it is. It could be one of those things where, if your ad creative is not particularly great, your ad copy is not particularly intriguing and people aren't clicking that much, you may get 10,000 impressions for the cost of one click. But also you had 999,000 times that no one thought your ad was appealing enough to click. And so sometimes even if that's not like the way you are paying for those particular ads, you will still see that as being frequently reported because it gives you a nice metric that you can compare to understand within your industry how your campaigns are doing to other campaigns that are in the same industry.
Is there a use case for focusing on CPM versus CPC?
For me, it all comes down to what your goals are, right? If my goal is purely branding and awareness, and I'm just trying to get in front of as many eyeballs as I possibly can, I'm not as caught up on cost per click because it's reaching people as many people as I can, as often as I can. And so then that cost per thousand is what I'm really looking for. If it's, hey, I want them to consume this content or do this thing on the website, then I'm really only interested in what the cost per click is. Because again, if we serve 10,000 impressions, but I only have one person that clicks, like that's just not great. I am not achieving what I set out to achieve.
Sure. Okay. And then that third acronym we looked at was CPA. CPA tends to be the metric leadership cares about the most.
Well, sure.
So, what makes your cost per acquisition so valuable and sometimes tricky to
Yeah.
measure?
So cost per acquisition is like ringing the bell, right? So acquisition is we brought that client in, we sold that product, we did like the ultimate thing that we are set out to do. And you can calculate that in like a grander scheme in terms of saying like, hey, we spent $10,000 on marketing, and with that marketing, we had 10,000 people come and buy this thing. So then you can deduce what your overall cost per acquisition was. But it starts to get tricky when you think about the digital world or the traditional world, because so very rarely is someone going and buying the thing after being exposed to it one time, right? Usually it's hey, I heard this on the radio or on my podcast. I saw, a billboard somewhere, or I saw a display ad online. And then later it was in my, my social media feed. And because at that moment I was kind of just killing time, I was able to click through. Well, did the social media ad really do it? Should it get all the credit? And so what you're seeing is, it used to be that it did. We were doing last click attribution, and it was like, oh, that social ad is really rocking it. And so then everybody poured all this money into social and kind of forgot about the other things. And I was like, well, wait a minute, that didn't necessarily translate to like all this more money didn't translate into all these more acquisitions. And so there's really been this push towards more of a data-driven model and understanding that everything kind of has its role. And so that is why that cost per acquisition is so tricky, is you don't necessarily know or understand which piece of these, sequence of 10 events or 10 exposures was the one that really made Angie decide, hey, I'm going to do it. I'm going to buy this thing.
Right. And so that's why you probably see on websites where they ask, like, how did you hear about us?
Yeah.
To try to kind of isolate.
Please fill those out.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's great. So looking beyond, cost per thousand, cost per click, and cost per acquisition, we also hear metrics like CTR, which is click through rate.
Yeah.
So what does that tell us that the CPC doesn't tell us?
Sure. So click through rate is truly a how many times was this ad clicked on compared to the number of times that ad was served.
Okay.
Right. So it is just a simple, math formula. And it has nothing to do with the pricing of it.
Okay.
So click-through rate is really important when I'm trying to understand which ad creative is working best, what messaging is grabbing people and getting them to click, because that initial click tells us whether or not they were interested, whether or not they wanted to take that next step. So that's going to be the thing that when clients are wanting to know, did we serve the right messaging? Of the 5 ads we're running, which one's performing the best? I'm looking at click-through rate. Assuming that we're operating in a display ad, social media ad world. If you shift over to more of like streaming audio, streaming video kind of stuff, there's not a click there in most cases. So I'm not looking at click-through rate.
Okay. Makes sense. And how about conversion rate? Why is that such an important companion metric to your cost per acquisition?
Yeah, so like we said, cost per acquisition is like we rang the bell. But as marketers, we know, especially when we're talking about like big ticket items, things with a longer buying cycle, there are usually a lot of like little micro steps that I've done to indicate that I have interest. And we would call those things conversions. So like I'm going to download the white paper, or I'm going to, join the email list, or I'm going to fill out this form. Things that I can track as a conversion. As someone has done that, they're indicating they have a higher level of interest, and I want to continue that conversation. But then also, once I've defined that that is a conversion, the algorithm, if I've set up my code correctly, the algorithm can say, "Oh, Angie requested that download. I know." As Google, I know all of the things that Angie's been doing in her online experience. Who else has been doing a lot of these things? And that allows the algorithm to go out and start saying, well, I know we want to serve ads to all these people that fit this demographic that we've defined in our targeting, but really this subset is more likely to click. So we're going to lean into that a little bit more. And so we're doing that as a team on our end, but also the algorithm is doing that for us. We've always joked about, AI has kind of been a part of our job for a while. We've been using machine learning. We've been using AI because that's been baked into those algorithms for the last decade plus. Because there are things about the way you and I use the internet that like I couldn't even articulate, but Google understands. Okay. Because Google understands my dwell rate and everything that I do when I'm online, assuming that I'm, not like so locked down.
Right.
And so it's building this like data story, if you will. And if it can find other people that have a 85% match to a similar data story, then they know that that person's like, oh, you look a lot alike. What about this ad?
Okay. Makes sense. They know far more than I probably want them to know
Yeah.
about me. So on the digital side, what are the engagement metrics trying to tell us? Things like video completion rate or time on site.
Yeah. So video completion rate is what I would consider to be the success metric that I would look at if I was doing, video, obviously, but also a completion rate on the audio side. If someone didn't listen to it all the way through, didn't watch our ad all the way through, I would take that as a sign that they're probably not super interested, right? And so that is the metric that I'm looking at to understand like which creative is more effective, what messaging works better. On the engagement side, in terms of like once people get to the website, time on site helps me understand, are they looking at multiple pages? Are they really reading the content? But also time on site can be a little bit misleading because if you are relying on Google Analytics to tell you time on site, one, it's not there anymore. When they moved to GA4, that metric is available, but it is not like openly available within platform. You have to pull it out in like some data analytics software, which we do. But also it's still true that if I'm driving someone to a landing page and the expectation of this campaign is that everything they need to know to convert is on this landing page, and that we really very intentionally don't want them to jump off and look at other places on the website, or conversely, we send them to this landing page for them to go do something off on a third-party site. If they're never looking at a second page within the website, Google Analytics doesn't understand how long they've actually been there. So your time on site is a big old goose egg. And so time on site tells a really great story, but it only works in some instances. And it's really important to know that going in and to have that understanding so that you can talk with leadership about like, is this a time where time on site really makes sense as a metric that we want to look at? Or is this one of those instances where that goose egg is actually saying like, we nailed it. That's exactly what we wanted them to do. I can't right offhand think of an instance, but we've had several in our 5-year history at Cohort where we sent them to a landing page where then, they had opportunities to pick like a couple of different things, but all of those things took them off site. This landing page was purely like, hey, make your decision of the direction you want to go. And it was, a funnel to get them to that end placement. And it really stunk because we can track when they hit there, we weren't able to track any of the other places. Yeah, which, again, makes that cost per acquisition become near impossible to really drill down to like a channel placement level.
All right.
Well, so let's flip the tables here. Let's ask, there are some traditional media metrics as well.
Mm-hmm.
When we move into traditional media like TV or radio, the metrics change. And like, this is still a relatively new world for me. I'm glad that it's something that you really specialize in.
Yeah.
Explain to us, what are GRPs and why do they matter?
So your GRPs are your gross ratings point. So you're definitely not going to see that in digital.
Yeah.
The gross rating point is those who have been reached times the frequency. Okay. So your gross rating point really shows you like a share of that target market, how many you're actually connecting with, multiplied by that frequency that you have placed with them. And that overall is going to show you your gross ratings point. And so that just gives you a good idea of like how many people, you're getting in front of and how frequently, because, you want to hit your minimums in terms of frequency while also reaching like the right amount of people. And overall, it's going to measure the impact of that placement. So that's really what it's showing you is, within this universe is another term that you'll see in traditional that you may not see on the digital side. The universe is like all of your potential audience.
Yeah.
Your potential unique visitors. And then your gross ratings point is just how many within that multiplied by that frequency.
So your GRP is essentially a number that helps you understand your share of voice within that universe.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So talk about how reach and frequency work together and why they're still so important in traditional and in streaming media.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned before, reach is that percentage of your universe that you're connecting with, that they're going to hear your message, see your message, whether that be on, typically we're talking about radio and television, broadcast, cable, that kind of thing. And then your frequency is just the number of times that we're getting in front of them. And as we've said before, it's a lot more like you need to do that more often than what it used to be because there's just so many other types of, you know, advertising that's out there.
Yeah.
And there's just people are consuming so differently. They're on their phones while they're watching or, in the car, they're going to be kind of distracted. So you want to make sure that you are sharing your ad enough times that it's going to resonate and stick in their brains for sure. And so those two things work together because separately, they're going to give you very different pictures, but together they're going to give a much better idea with that gross ratings point of the actual impact. Like, what are we doing? Because you can reach a lot of people with one time. And
which is kind of useless.
Yeah, kind of useless. Or you can hit a group of people a lot of times, but if it's only 5% of your potential group, then again, kind of useless. So you want to make sure that you are reaching. I keep saying reaching and it's going to confuse with reach and impression. You want to make sure that you are implementing enough to have that reach to get a large portion of that target market while also placing enough ads in front of them with that enough frequency for it to really have that lasting impression and then convert.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit before about on the streaming side of things. The great part about streaming is I can really narrowly target like what I do with the rest of digital. But sometimes that defined audience becomes so small that as you're watching, you're binge watching, your favorite program, you see that same ad at the beginning of every single ad break. You may see it twice during an ad break. And that is an advertiser that maybe has a higher frequency cap or no frequency cap, you know. And it's not like on the buying end, we understand like the cadence in which someone's getting an ad. We don't get that picture. So we may say like, hey, I want to cap this at 3 a day, but you will hit a point where they just become annoyed. You've lost that potential sell, that potential interest because you've just irritated them.
Streaming consumption is just
so
different.
Yeah, it is what it is. I mean, that it's sort of the glory days of like consumerism in terms of like really watching the TV that you want to watch. Yeah, you get to watch it whenever you want. That's what I tell my kids. I'm like, in my day, cartoons were a Saturday morning only thing. And if you weren't there because you were busy with something, like, too bad, so sad. We don't have Disney all the time or Nickelodeon. Thanks, Mom.
No, we do not. What is one metric you wish more marketers understood or stopped obsessing over?
Ooh. I don't really know. I mean, I do get a little bit frustrated when people get like, hyper focused on like they want a large number of impressions or they want a giant click through rate or like some of that stuff. Again, in the bigger picture, it's like those are great metrics, and maybe that is the metric, but in a lot of instances, I really want to know how it all trickles down to like that bottom line. Reaching 1 million people or having a 25% click-through rate, if it didn't generate any conversions or any acquisitions, whatever your thing is, if you're selling a service, and you're booking your time, or you're selling a tangible item, if that transaction's not taking place, then we've missed the mark somewhere, and so then we need to start to backtrack to figure out, how can we refine this to start doing things right? And so that's the thing. I think that sometimes we get a little bit like, "Ooh, but look at this." And it can be nice because it can help tell a story to your leadership that maybe explains why we need to do something a little bit differently. Or, hey, this didn't really work, but here's like the silver lining of this cloud. But ultimately for me, I wish that we were a little bit more eye on the prize all the time. But also, like, I'm a business owner and I'm highly competitive. So of course that is my answer.
Well, on the traditional side, obviously, like, the reach can be, and what I mean by the reach as something that I wish they would maybe not obsess over quite so much. It really just in terms of the specific placements, right? So sometimes people just want to be at the cool places. Like, it's fun and it's exciting to be like, we have an ad in the Super Bowl. We have an ad in the NCAA tournament, or we have an ad in, this sporting event or what have you, like these really big moments that are televised and they're reaching so many people. And it is like, it's exciting and it's cool and it's fun and there's a time and a place. But for a lot of businesses, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that reach is a lot of people that really aren't ever actually part of your target audience.
So while we didn't dig into that today, reach is so important, but also identifying that target market and making sure that those things
align.
They align is really important. And just having something cool and flashy isn't going to move the needle.
Yeah.
And so we want to make sure you are, because like you said, we're competitive. We want to make sure that we're doing the best thing we can for you and for your business. And a lot of times those placements aren't it.
Yeah, because that fraction that you can get in your target audience that's watching that big dollar ad placement, you could also get in other places and you could hit way more times for that same budget. And in the end, be a lot more effective and efficient.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we've maybe helped demystify some metrics, maybe planted a few more questions for future episodes. I don't know. Speaking of future episodes, the next topic we'll be talking about in our next episode will be the challenges of using AI in media platforms. And if you are an active media buyer, it is being jammed. Okay, it's being jammed down our throats, but realistically, AI is being jammed down everyone's throats.
Absolutely.
And so there are definitely some things that our team has learned as we are placing ads that you need to really be paying attention to because they don't always work in your favor. So it turns out AI is, it's good-ish.
Ish.
Sometimes.
Yes.
A percentage is good.
Tune in next time on the next episode of Beyond the Buy,
where we dig into the strategies, trends, and tactics that are impacting paid media today.